But really excited about this roundtable discussion. These are three individuals, or two at least at the present moment, that I think very highly of. I've learned a lot from. I've used their case studies all across the country. They've been incredibly successful using their self-directed IRAs, and they've really learned how to fully operate their self-directed IRAs, I think, in a short period of time. So if everyone could please join me in welcoming to the stage Jan and Bob. Come on up. I'm going to have Jan and Bob introduce themselves, and they're actually going to take you through a slide presentation. All right? And then we're going to do some Q&A, some commentary. We're going to really take you through and dissect some transactions. So excited about it. Well, you met Jeff already, but I'm going to have Jan and Bob introduce themselves in just a moment. Before I do that, I do need to present this disclaimer as we've been presenting throughout the weekend as we get started here. So Equity Trust is a passive custodian. As Michelle had mentioned early yesterday, we're domiciled in South Dakota as a non-depository trust company. As such, as a passive custodian, we don't provide due diligence. We don't review your investments for legality. We're a non-fiduciary, non-discretionary custodian. That means after you leave today, you need to do your own due diligence prior to engaging in transactions. If you're going to invest with someone here or someone outside of here, it's important that you perform due diligence on that individual, right? And work with competent attorneys, CPAs, and other professionals in the industry. Like I said before, you have the vision. If you're not an attorney and you don't practice law, you have the vision, you give it to an attorney, and then they're the ones who are going to draw up the architecture plans. All right? That's ultimately the best way to paint the picture. All right, the opinions or ideas expressed are not necessarily those of Equity Trust Company, nor do they reflect their views or endorsements. These materials are for informational purposes only. And of course, past results of these individuals is not a prediction of what your results will be in the future. Okay? So important to understand that as well. So that being said, I have Jan, who's going to present first. She's going to talk about buy, fix, and sell using multiple self-directed accounts. So she has some really good content on how she has found properties, got them under contract, and she has gone through the process of renovations using self-directed IRAs and some of the mechanics. Bob is going to talk about owner financing using a 401k, in fact, and wrap mortgages, which works out really well because Jeff talked about wrap mortgages yesterday afternoon. So you're going to see some stuff in a real-world application here in just a moment.
Thank you, John. Privileged to be here to share with you all. I actually got started in real estate in 1985. My husband, Gary, who's here with me this weekend, was an architect, and he had incredible vision. So we were married 35 years ago, and when we went to buy our first house, he found the ugliest, most dreadful, disgusting property he could find in a beautiful area and said, honey, I think this is the house we should buy and live in. So I went kicking and screaming to the closing table, but he was able to get me to purchase that house with him, and it took us 2 years to fix it up. But at the end of those 2 years, we realized we had made more money on that transaction than we did working our full-time jobs. And that's when the light went on for me, and I thought, there's a business here. So I left my banking job and started in real estate full-time investing, and he joined me a year later, and for 13 years, we did everything real estate. We were renovating high-end homes in the Hollywood Hills, which is in California, Los Angeles area. We were doing lease options. We did seller carryback financing, hard money lending, and just tried a little bit of everything. And then he decided to give back and go to work with our church. And so for the last 17 years, I've been doing the real estate investing on my own. And we moved to St. Louis, which is a fantastic place here in the Midwest to be investing in real estate. And my specialty has been the buy, fix up, and sell, as well as some lease options. And now I'm doing some seller carryback financing on my wholesale flips when I sell to other investors and want to carry paper for them. and also doing some buy and holds. And certainly Equity Trust Company and self-directed IRAs has become my best tool in my real estate tool belt, and I think that's what I'm here to share today when we get to that part of the presentation. But as John said, our daughter is a junior in college, and she's really the one that got us started with Equity Trust Company, and I'll go into that story a little bit a little later. We also kept a home in California, in Coronado and San Diego, and so we're starting to split our time a little bit more there. I was there 12 weeks last year and hope to spend a little more time there. And that's my story.
Thank you, Jan. Bob, you're up.
I'm the next contestant. I'm Bob. I'm from Cincinnati. I've been doing real estate since I got fired from my job back in 1991. I started doing self-directed stuff probably late 90s. At that point, Mr. Desich, who was the founder of Equity, or of Mid-Ohio Securities at the time, went around to all the little RIAs, and I was at a trade show and talked to him, and I'm like, okay, so I can put this money in, and I can do the real estate stuff that I already know how to do, and all the money that money makes, I never, ever, ever have to pay taxes on? That's brilliant. Sign me up. So I did that. And then I think it was a couple of years later, they came out with the CISA accounts. And the CISA accounts, at the time, the maximum contribution was $500. But one of my goals was, okay, I had young kids at the time, but I wanted to make sure that I could afford to pay for their college when the time came around. So I started really working CISA accounts for the kids. And today it's paying for all 4 kids' high school and college tuition. So it has made a big difference for me. And I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to play with these accounts and have some fun in the process.
Awesome. Thank you, Bob. Jeff, you want to do a quick intro? I know everyone, for the most part, knows you, but...
I'm going to try and talk a little bit about Stan's story, if that's okay.
That'd be good.
My name's Jeff Watson, and I'm privileged to call Stan a friend and a client. And there's some other guys in the room that've got that same privilege. And, you know, I don't know where he is right now. He's probably got some crisis he's dealing with. But Stan had a challenge. His wife is very successful in the corporate world, and they've had to move a few times. And when Roth IRAs came out, the contribution limits were such that Stan had a very limited window to make contributions into his Roth IRA. And so for very small amount of money that he was able to contribute to the Roth because of the income limitations, because of what he was making flipping houses and what his wife was making in the corporate world, he had to be very careful with what he did. So he had to find strategies to take the little bit of money that he could put into his self-directed Roth and find ways to really get a significant rate of return. And one of his favorite tools to do that is an option. I can tell you I've helped him do a few of the deals where another equity trust account holder had a loan that went bad, secured by real estate in a nearby city. Stan's IRA takes an option on that note and mortgage, begins to rattle the borrower's cage with, hey, you know, this account's got enough money to pay for, with the option, I can buy this thing out and I could foreclose on you. You feel like you want to bring this thing current, rattle the cage, and lo and behold, the payments start rolling in again. And then the option agreements calls for how the payments get split between the original lender and the option holder. And so that's a technique that's worked quite well for him. And he's had to look at a lot of other techniques of how to take small amount of contributions, and I'll be just generic and say less than $25,000 in contributions, and now he's turned it into a 7-figure account.
That's awesome. Yeah, he gave me a case study. This was years ago in the infancy stages of his daughter's covered education savings account. He found a property in Atlanta, Georgia, and it was a tear down, and he put an option on the property with his daughter's covered education savings account. So the optionee on the contract wasn't Stan, it wasn't his LLC, it was Equity Trust Company Custodian, FBO, his daughter's CISA account. And then he assigned that option contract to a rehabber that was going to tear down the property and build, I don't know if it was a single or a double, but they were going to develop the lot. And he made, I think it was $4,096.20 was the exact amount that was in his trust account. So his option fee on that was $100. So the CISA put up $100 to secure the property with an option. As Jeff was saying, he had control without ownership. He had the right to exercise, but not the financial obligation to exercise. So he was able to do his due diligence, and then he assigned the contract. He made $4,096.20 tax-free in the CISA. And I presume he's done many other transactions that I'm not aware of since then. And just like for those of you that weren't in the advanced session yesterday, you saw that dynamic of Stan on the whiteboard, and some people I know followed it, some people didn't follow it, but got it sketched out. And then what does he do with that? He with his vision, again, he gives it to the proper attorney to paper the transaction to make things proper and make things legitimate. So that's an important piece of that I wanted to make sure I get out there for everyone. That being said, I'm going to transition back to Jan. Jan, I'm going to give you the PowerPoint clicker, and you can thumb through your slides. And you have in the front there, you can see the deck for you, so that way you don't have to look backwards. And I'm just going to go ahead and let you take it away. I might have a couple questions for you along the way. And then what we'll do for the audience Q&A portion, let's get through the presentation portion, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A for folks, okay? Does that sound good? Yeah. Good with that? Okay, awesome. Go ahead, Jan.
Great, thank you. So in my intro, I told you about that first house that we bought in 1985 and how that led me to become a lifestyle entrepreneur. So I've always had an office in my home so that I can work any hours of the day. And I joke that I work half-time, but I get to choose which 12 hours a day I work. But it has gotten a lot easier more recently. And it's been fun because I feel like I've been a full-time mom as well as a full-time businesswoman. So it's been a real privilege, the lifestyle. And as John alluded to, we had the wonderful privilege of attending a one-day wealth workshop in St. Louis that John presented at. And it was our daughter, who we had brought along at age 13, who we were homeschooling at the time, who sat in the front row and took copious notes. And John was great at engaging her and making her feel important. And as we walked out of that one-day seminar, she turned to my husband and I and said, well, we're going to that national conference, aren't we? And my husband and I looked at each other and said, well, I guess we are. And so that's when we got on the phone with John and figured out, okay, what is this all about? And let's get started. And so we went ahead and we converted our traditional IRAs right away to Roth IRAs, because it just made perfect sense what he said about taxing the seed instead of the fruit. So we were really privileged at that time to have this concept because we'd heard so much about diversification. But to us, in the past decades, that had meant making our money in real estate and then diversifying into the stock market just to lose that money and then to go back and make more money in real estate. And so we were thrilled to learn about a concept where we could control our money, control our investments, and do what we did best, which was real estate. So we went ahead and started with $187,000 in our accounts, and that was actually in 2012, so 6 years ago. And we've grown that to $1.6 million, and it's been a fun process. It's been a joy to do it. I've been able to do it through a lot of buy, fix, up, and sell, as well as some wholesale deals to other investors. And we'll go through a couple of those in the case studies. What I like about being able to use our Roth IRAs, self-directed Roth IRAs, is that no matter what the market's doing, there's always opportunity. And it's just knowing what the market is doing and figuring out the strategy that's best for the market at that particular time. And so it doesn't matter what the market's doing. There's always an opportunity in real estate. So here's a first case study. This is a house that I renovated in Missouri, and you can get an idea. These are the after photos, and what we do is create like new houses in established neighborhoods. And to give you an overview, this is a house that I bought in October of 2016 for $299,000, and looks like there's an extra number there on the next line, but between October 17th and April of the following year, we made 7 payments to our contractor. So that's an easy way to take the money from the IRA and pay for the renovation. So I have a wonderful relationship with several GCs, general contractors, and I actually have done some wonderful joint ventures with these contractors. So what I've worked out with them is that I will give them all the money for materials and subs, they'll do the work, and then they'll hand the keys back to me, I'll sell the property, and then we'll split the profit, usually 40% to the contractor and 60% to me. And so it's a great way to not have to pay all of those fees to your contractor up front. The contractor's really motivated in the deal because every $100 he saves, that's $40 he's putting in his pocket. So it eliminates a lot of my oversight of the GC, and it's been a wonderful idea for us. So with this transaction, the IRA received $54,550 after expenses, and it was about an 8.5-month process. And then here's just some fun pictures, because everyone likes pictures of beautiful houses. But what we do is we take these houses down to the studs and plywood and rebuild them. It's all cosmetic, usually, although we're not afraid of the challenges. If it's mold or foundation problems, we'll take care of those as well. But we really like to create just beautiful houses, and our buyers follow our work, and we usually plug them in. Once they find a Duke Homes house that they like, they're off to the races. And we always open up these houses and make them just a beautiful flowing floor plan. There's the dining room, there's the master bedroom, and you can see it's a small bath, but we make it as beautiful as possible and make it all brand new, which people love. We always add these cubbies. People love the idea of keeping organized. And then we always finish our lower levels because it's a way of doubling the square footage without a major expense. So we'll open up the lower level. We'll take off that little door up at the top so you don't feel like you're going into a basement. In fact, we don't even use the B word. We always refer to these as the lower levels. And so people feel like they're just going into an extension of their home because we use the same finishes as we do on the main level. And then here's another case study. This is a property that I sold to another investor. So the nice part of doing a lot of marketing is you get more properties than you can personally renovate. So I've established this great stable of investors, and when I have more properties than what I can handle, I pass them on to others. So this is a house that I just bought in May, and I purchased it in our IRAs for $370,000. I actually had 70% in my IRA and 30% in my husband's. And then I sold it a couple months later to an investor for $419,000. And so the net profit was $46,000 after expenses, which we split 70-30 between the two accounts. And it was a nice 2-month transaction. I actually had it pre-sold, but my investor friend was going out of town for the summer, and he didn't want to have to start the project until he got back. And so I said, no problem, I'll hold it for you for 2 months. So it worked out very well. And then just to give an example of a buy and hold, this is a property that we just bought in July. So we bought it for $171,000 in my IRA, and then we began renovation. Same day we closed on it, and it'll be about $30,000 to fix this one up. We'll just take about 6 weeks, and then we'll rent it for $2,200 a month, or we may even lease option it. It'll be worth about $350 at the time. When this house first sold, It was built about 11 years ago, and when it first sold, it sold for $419,000. So we got a really great deal on this one at $171,000. Lots of fun stories on this one. When we showed up the day of closing, the neighbor met us and said, "Oh, we're so glad you bought that house. Do you see that bullet hole through my house? That came from your window." Evidently, it was not on purpose, but that bullet ended up in the neighbor's pantry. So they were really grateful that those people moved on and sold the house to us. So we'll have fun renovating this one. These are the before pictures, and we're just getting started. Actually, we'll just be finished with this one in the next couple weeks. And then just to share a little bit more about our daughter and her story and how she got us involved. So when we attended that workshop and she was all excited, what we decided was to keep the momentum going, we needed to set her up with her own IRA. So we found a way to do that. Because I'm self-employed, it was very easy to put her on our website and to put her in some of our marketing materials and then pay her $5,500. And why $5,500? Because that's the exact amount that goes into her IRA. So we had fun sitting her down at our big conference table and presenting her with a check for $5,500. And of course, her eyes lit up, but then we explained to her where that money was going. But it was very fun because we really had her buy-in. You know, she was very excited to think that she was going to have her own IRA and that she could start to take control of it and figure out how to make it work and grow. So she has bought 5 different houses, portions of 5 houses, anywhere from 3% to 7% that she's had invested in properties that I have renovated to sell. So she's grown her IRA up to $50,000 in 4 years, and it's fun to see how she's off to the races. And it was cute because I got a text message. She unfortunately was not able to attend this weekend, although she wanted to, but she sent me a great text message yesterday saying, "Mom, I hope you're taking good notes for me." It's like, yes, it's a great text. And then as far as the titling, it's so simple, combining accounts, and I know Equity Trust has hit that home this weekend. But what we do is we just do the Equity Trust Company Custodian FBO account number, and we do use the numbers, not the names, just to stay a little more anonymous. And then undivided interest and Equity Trust Company Custodian FBO account number such and such, IRA, and then another percentage, undivided interest. And we list all 3 IRAs on the title. It's very simple. And when we do our bill pays, we send 3 checks, but it's never been a problem. We always explain to people, you'll get 3 checks. We hold this property in our IRA, 3 different IRAs, and they never have a challenge with it. And it's very simple, very easy, and a lot of fun.
Someone always asks me, they say, wait a second, Brittany, it looks like she's doing the work on the property, you know? So like we said, you can do the desk work, but you can't do the sweat equity, right? Well, I don't believe that was actually an IRA property, right?
You know, it was an IRA property, John, but do you notice she's wearing a white dress? Those are not work clothes. She said the same thing when she got up on the ladder. She said, "Mom, I can't do any work." I said, "Well, sweetheart, you're wearing a white dress. I don't think people are going to think you're actually doing the work, but I guarantee you she did not do the work. She just stood on the ladder for the photo."
Now, did you have my understanding is there was a time where there wasn't enough funding available in all 3 IRAs for the full purchase and renovation, so you had the joint venture arrangement with the contractor who paid for some of the labor or all the labor and the materials or a portion of it?
Yeah, they actually pay for all their own labor. So these contractors have to have enough to live on that they don't need to pay themselves until the property sells. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So the monies that our IRA is giving to the GC covers all the subs and all the materials, but not their costs, not their labor costs. And so once the property sells, that's when they get paid. So they're incredibly motivated with me to make sure that this property is done right and quickly, and then they're rewarded at the same time that I am.
That makes sense. And do you run that through the settlement? So is the title company actually sending a check to the contractor that's listed on this, disclosed on the settlement statement, I presume?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Once we know the property's under contract and we know what it's going to sell for, it's very easy to figure out what the profit's going to be, and then I multiply that by 40%, and then I just send a note to the title company saying, I'd like you to pay so-and-so at closing this amount.
Okay.
And then it shows up on the closing statement, and then the contractor picks up his check from the title company.
So transition over to Bob. Jan, if you could pass the both control sticks over to Bob. So Bob, go ahead and take us away. You can run through the presentation.
Okay, so this first deal was, I bought this in my son's CISA account. At the time, he had a bird dog that would run around and take pictures of all the HUD houses for me, and we'd run comps, and he'd figure out and get the offers made. This was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath in Price Hill, which is not the best part of Cincinnati. And so with these type of owner financing deals, what I love to do is fix the mechanicals and get it so that it's livable, but not spend the money that it would take to make the house pretty. Now, first thing off, when you're doing owner financing, what do you need to be careful of? Dodd-Frank, yes. So if you're going to go do this, make sure you know the rules, and general rule of thumb is one a year you're fine. If you're doing more than that, you need to be more careful. So the house wasn't in bad shape. It just wasn't beautiful like Jan's houses are. So this is a house that would rent for $600, $700, $800 a month in Cincinnati. I had, roughly $9,000 in the place. So I put an ad on Craigslist that said, if you can do the work, you can own this house for $595 down, $395 a month. You think I got a couple phone calls? I got a whole bunch of applications. So I ended up selling it on a land contract, 33.5, 15 years, 8%. Now, but the interesting thing was, the guy who ended up buying the house was not your typical Price Hill renter. He worked for OSHA. He had a $3,100 a month military retirement income, plus he made another $8,000 a month, was in the process of going through a divorce. This house just worked for him and his situation. And so I ended up getting a real good, high-quality person in here, and ended up with a real nice, he then put a bunch of money in the house. I went through and did the calculation. It's like a 44% internal rate of return, which is nice for CISA accounts, because in CISA accounts, you need to sort of really multiply the money that you have in there. Because if you're paying $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year tuition bills, it's sort of tough to get from $2,000 to that amount unless you're doing that type of thing. And so...
And Bob, one thing I wanted to make sure everyone understands, and this was a transaction in Ohio, Bob used a land contract or a contract for deed. So when he sold the property, and feel free to jump in here, and Jeff, we can get some commentary from you as well. When the property was sold to the end buyer, the owner occupant, right? It was sold on a land contract, not on a sale with a carryback note and mortgage. So the deed was not transferred to the homeowner. The deed won't be transferred until their last payment is made, correct me if I'm
correct.
wrong.
And the way I describe a land contract to people is it's like a car title. When you buy a car and borrow money from the bank, they give you this little white slip of paper that says, well, yeah, the bank really owns it, but you can have the car until you finish paying it. And when you finish paying it, we'll give you the actual title to the car.
In Ohio, Bob, why are you structuring it that way?
So in this type of seller finance transaction works really well in Ohio because we have a great land contract law. So what happens is when somebody doesn't pay me, and on these type of transactions, roughly about 20% of the people blow up. Once they are 30 days delinquent, at that point I give them a 10-day notice, and after that it's like a regular eviction, provided that two criteria are met. Number one, they have to have paid less than 20% of the principal balance of the property. And number two, they have to have been there for less than 5 years. So if somebody pays off half the price of the house, yeah, then I have to go foreclose. But at that point, I got all my money back, so I'm fine. On the other hand, if they pay on time, if they pay for 5 years, and in year number 6 they blow up, I can either go work something out with them, or I have to foreclose. But again, if I have somebody who's paid me on time for 5 years, yeah, the foreclosure is expensive and takes a long time, but it's not the end of the world. And I have done quite a few of these and haven't really actually had to foreclose on people. Just if you talk to people and you work with them, you can usually work something out. Does that answer your question?
That does answer the question. Now, this is still an active transaction?
Well, so now what happened was my son started college last September, and so this transaction was in his CISA account. So I did a 15-year note in his CISA account, and he was going to graduate from college long before they finished making these payments. And then the other thing, too, is high school was like $12,000 or $14,000 a year, and college was a lot more expensive. So I didn't have quite enough money in his CISA account to pay for all his tuition this coming year, because I had a number of these, little transactions, and making 44% is great, but at some point when you got to pay a bill, you got to do something. So I was at the Ohio Real Estate Investors Convention last November, and there I ran into a guy that I had previously sold some notes to. And he and his daughter had an IRA that they wanted to buy another note in. And he's like, hey, Bob, you have any more notes? I'm like, I got just the note for you. And so he wanted to partner with his and his daughter's IRA. So I ended up selling it at a 10% yield. I actually sold the remaining payments after having collected 4 years worth of payments for $24,000. So I made $300 a month for like 4 years, plus got another $24,000, and that's not bad for an original $8,000 or $9,000 investment. That then gave me the money to pay for my son's tuition. And then plus, he's older and retired, and what he wants is somebody that's just going to send a check every month, and he doesn't have to think about it. And so this is a perfect type of, when you sell properties on owner financing, the notes become more valuable once you have somebody that does a good job and pays over a long period of time. And if you're going to sell the notes to somebody who's not super unsophisticated, you should make sure you're selling them something that's good, because you don't want to be in the business of selling somebody crap and then having them be upset with you. And
Bob, what would you say would be sort of like the pivot point? Do you have sort of, whether it's from someone else or an analysis of, okay, if they've made consecutively 18 months of payment, the probability goes to X that they will continue to make payments?
My experience is if they pay for the first, they either blow up or in the first 2 years. If they do well for 2 years, you're probably golden. Now, every once in a while, somebody gets divorced and their world blows up, but by and large, 2 years, you're great.
Okay.
And
great. And real quick, what I wanted to mention, because you're on this topic, and coincidentally, Vina and Larry both stepped in the room. So a little bit later this morning and then later this afternoon, Larry Goins, Larry, if you could raise your hand, everyone say hi to Larry.
Hi, Larry.
Larry is going to be speaking about a lot of what Bob is talking about: seller financing, buying and selling on land contract, buying HUD houses and selling them on land contract, and seller financing. So he's going to actually go into this more in depth. And then Vina, who is right next to Larry, everyone wave to Vina. Vina is also going to be speaking, who is good friends with Bob, and she invests in the Cincinnati market as well. So a lot of the things that Bob is talking about, you're going to hear more of from Vina. So make sure you stay tuned for that.
Yeah, Vina taught me how to do this. No, it was, yeah, and I'm like, that's brilliant. I should do that more. So, okay, so back in 2014, I went to a seminar like this at the Cleveland Real Estate Investors Association, and Jeff actually taught quite a bit there about IRAs. And I had two big takeaways from that session. One is that 401ks are a far superior account to IRAs. And the second was that I needed to get an inherited IRA or 401k. So I came back from that conference. I immediately set up a 401k for myself. I figured out how to get my dad some earned income so he could set up a 401k. But then I needed to put something in these accounts. So there was a guy I know who does a bunch of short sales. He contacted me. It was a 4-bedroom, 2.5-bath, 2-story in Forest Park, which is a pretty decent suburb of Cincinnati. $67,000 purchase price. The house was livable and decent, but not nice. So there's the property. Now, the trick was, since I just started these accounts, there wasn't much money in it. So I had another friend that lent the money to the 401k to buy the house. Now, the short sale agent that brought the house to me, he had somebody that wanted to rent that house for $1,000 a month and was willing to take care of the minor stuff that it needed. So my buddy lent the 401k the money, 7%, 30 years for $32, $35. So it has a nice cash flow there. And I actually, the loan also to the friend has an equity participation clause that they get a little bit of the profit in addition to the interest. Because in order to, so the IRA or the 401k is not putting a big down payment because there's not a lot of money. So you need to sort of incentivize the lender of, well, hey, you're going to get a little something else here too. So it's worked out real well. I think that house is bringing in $1,300 a month now, and it's just cranking along. And so the other thing people were talking about at the seminar were wrap loans. And I'd heard about them, and I found them to be interesting, but I had just never figured out how to do them. And I'm like, okay, well, so I got this money into the account for my dad, and I had the situation that somebody had a house that they were going to buy for 80 grand. They were going to put 25 grand down and rehab it and fix it. He needed to borrow 55 grand. Well, so when I do hard money loans, it's 5 points, 15%, $695 worth of my own fees. I don't negotiate. That's my terms. And if people can borrow money from Fifth Third or Chase at 4%, they should go do that. But when you need to get the deal done, then you call me, those are the terms. Well, I had another friend that was willing to lend $50,000 at 2.5 points and 10.5% interest. So they did that, and then my dad's Roth IRA lent $5 grand, 5 points, 15% over 10 years. So the cool thing is that my dad's account, over the course of a year, if it gets paid off after a year, ends up making $5,500 or $5,300 by lending $5,000, which sort of gets that account moving in the right direction in terms of making money.
So I've been an investor. I'm 63, and I bought my first triplex when I was 22. So that tells you where the gray hairs come from. And I work full-time in the self-directed IRA investment world. That's all I do. I'm married, have a corporate wife, and so that frees me up to do this, which is very good. I used to buy and sell a lot of houses in South Florida outside of IRAs. Then I eventually converted to the IRA world. So we have a friend that always says, his tagline is, we're doing conventional investments with non-conventional funds. That's all we're doing. First time I saw this type of investment was in the late 70s. I worked for a company, and that's, I guess, the mid-'70s, about when the law changed for ERISA, and they said you could use your pension funds for investments. And I worked for a company that had a CPA smart enough to allow us to convert our pension funds into a fund and finance our own growth. We rebuilt a big manufacturing plant. And that stuck in my head. And then finally, 20 years later, I met the Desiches down in Florida, where I used to live. And that's how I got started in the business. I carried that application around for about 2 years until I figured it out, and then I did it. So yesterday I referenced, I don't speak professionally, so if somebody's heard me speak, it's usually at an equity trust conference. Yesterday I referenced my first Roth IRA deal. That house is in Dunwoody, Georgia, 1735 or 65 Redbourne Drive. It's a nice, very nice suburb of Atlanta. And I found that I stumbled into it when we were moving to Atlanta from Florida. And I had $4,500 in a Nations Bank Roth IRA, and I decided that was the time to strike. So I called Equity Trust. I wasn't a customer. They're not allowed to tell you what to do, but they told me how I could not contract the house, how the paperwork had to go. And so I bought that house with $4,500 of my Roth. I transferred my Roth from Nations Bank, Bank of America, to Equity Trust. And then I was allowed to put $1,500 more in that year, and that was the end of my Roth depositing. So when I put the $1,500 in, I was so nervous I transferred it into the deal. And so, but basically it was done at $4,500, and it netted about $103. It was a tough house. I hired a contractor. It took them about 9 months to clean it up. Every window and door had to be replaced. It was pretty beat up, but it was in a really nice neighborhood. And the guy that bought that's still in that house. I think I took those pictures out of my car. I was in Atlanta a couple months ago, and I think I shot those just every once in a while, go past it. So I had been buying and selling houses. I had done 30 or 40 houses by the time I had found this one. And typically in Florida, the ones I was buying and selling were smaller to keep them below FHA mortgage guidelines. So that was the easiest way to find a buyer in Florida. In Georgia, this is kind of the price point I worked in. So that was my first big house and my first Roth IRA deal, and I love it. Somebody also asked me yesterday about the due on sale clause. Well, right after 9/11, I hired an engineer to go look at a property, and his father-in-law had that house. Didn't look anything like that. And his father-in-law had deceased, and it was in a land trust. So he basically said, if you'll take the house over, and if you ever make anything good out of it, send me a check. So I bought that thing, properly through, it's in a trust, and I've got a trustee, and I loan the money into the deal. I don't technically own the deal, but I control it with my loans. That guy was deceased when we bought it in 2001, and he's still deceased, and and I have bought and I have sold and seller financed that house twice. I financed the divorce of the second lady that bought it because I wanted to keep her in the deal, and she eventually moved across country to be with family. That thing, I think I took it over when the mortgage balance was $41,000, and I probably put $50 into it, and I sent an appraiser out there to look at it before we sell it. They think it's worth over $325. It's a lot bigger house than it looks. It's a 5,000 square foot house. And to the left, there's a carriage house with a 2-bedroom apartment in it. So my daughter put this together for me. I pay her to put them together, and that funds her Roth. So she's doing this last week, and she said, "You're selling it again?" And I said, "Yes, that's why you keep going to these private out-of-state colleges." A house like that, I probably have 8 different funding solutions in that thing. I have, my Roth is always the point, whenever possible. My Roth is the point IRA, if you will. And then I probably have HSA money in there. I probably have the kids see some money in there. So I'll back fund, the main money with a bunch of other stuff. But my Roth is probably, my recollection back to 2001 is my Roth was the target IRA on that deal. That's the idea. John, I always tell John, to me, I think of it as a quiver of arrows. If you ever watched, I just watched one of those Mockingjay or Mockingbird or whatever shows. Hunger Games, right. My kids kept talking about it. One day I was trapped into watching it. And so my Roth, my pecking order is inheritable IRA, my Roth, my kids' Roths, and then I kind of have a pecking order on down. So my first arrow that I pull out is a Roth or an inheritable Roth, and I actually just inherited a Roth. Unfortunately, a friend of ours that we had opened the Roth for died, so I inherited a Roth. So strategically, tax planning vision, I pull out the arrow to be the primary tool, lever, to pull on these deals. And that's probably, I'm sure, my Roth. I do private equity lending. I do hard money loans. I've been doing that for a long time. I've done them in Ohio where I live. I like Georgia because it's a non-judicial foreclosure state. I lived in Georgia for 12 years. I've got the tools down there, the systems. I heard Jeff reference Stevens and Stevens. There's a lot of good lawyers in Atlanta. These guys do all the investor work that I've ever seen done down there, and they're really good. And these are typical hard money loans. Equipment leasing, same thing. We'll take a smaller IRA and typically do equipment leasings. One of the things I like, I've got a couple of mobile home parks in the pipeline. Nice thing about a mobile home park, and there's somebody here I talked to I'm going to follow up with, we'll finance individual mobile homes with individual IRAs or put a bundle of them together. Equipment leasing is a great thing for an IRA. So when your same property that you are invested in but you don't own needs a piece of equipment, you just have somebody cut a check for that piece of equipment. That picture on the left is a mobile home park up in Conneaut, Georgia that Jeff and I frequent quite often to just make sure our investment is doing well. That one in the middle is a mobile home park in Georgia. That's a zero-turn Kubota mower that an IRA funded for the park. Same thing with that green John Deere there. That's down in Georgia. The thing I like about the mobile home parks is they create layers. So you can take a couple of IRAs and do these two homes, and an IRA and do that one home, and a piece of equipment. And as that thing develops and there's money needs, you can just keep supplementing. I probably have 12, 14 entities into that mobile home park. When I got to Ohio, I didn't know the real estate market here as well. My wife took a job up here, and so I connected with a doctor. We formed an alliance, which we're no longer aligned, but I learned spine surgery, which is kind of ironic given my back. And his idea was we'd put a group of doctors together and we'd take their IRAs and put them into a fund, and we could fund what the doctors knew. I said, sound like a good idea. So I actually traveled around the country and learned, without touching patients, spine surgery. And that picture with me, that's actually, is the fellow here that sells the C-arms? He knows what that is. That's a lead apron you have to wear whenever they have an x-ray going. And so we put an IRA group together. Actually, I've got 2 IRA groups together. And we bought that building that's in the upper right. And the left picture, that's a procedure table, it's called. That's in that building, and that was for doing spine injections. And then all that equipment in the bottom left, that's one set of retractors. And to go into a joint venture with a hospital, you had to put up 49% of the asset money. And so we actually put the 49% of the asset money up. We did not do that with IRAs the first time because my partner, who was an investor with me, he was doing the procedures. There's 32 hospitals in Ohio that allow that to happen. That was the first one. The idea was the next 31 were going to be all the physicians' retirement funds. So we still have the building. It's leased out to a physician. and it's all IRA benefited. I mean, it's 100%. There's no IRA money in that building, non-IRA money in that building. We even went out and bought 2 retiring neurosurgical practices with the IRA money fund. So why do I do this? Well, number one, I enjoy what I do. I really enjoy what I do. I get to do what I want to do. I get to invest in what I want to invest in. I get to be creative. Those are my wife and 2 kids, and the one in the red jacket studied in Madrid last semester. And so we went over there, and we went to this park, and I took that picture. Well, when I was preparing this presentation, the name of the park showed up on the picture, the digital camera, the cell phone picture. And the name of the park is Bueno Retiro Parque, which means good retirement. And I did not know that at the time. I didn't know at the time. I didn't pick it up when I took the picture. I didn't look at the plaques when I walked in. We were just having fun and got out of an Uber right there by that fountain. But I think it's prophetic that that's kind of what it's all about. I don't think I'll ever retire, which is ironic. I don't want to retire, but I want to be able to do what I want to do. I want to be able to see my kids in school. The one on the right, the one in the red jacket, Amanda, she goes to the University of Richmond. The one in the black jacket, Madison, she goes to Vanderbilt. If you're thinking out-of-state private tuition, just think $65,000 a year plus all the costs to get there and back. That's all you got to think, just $65,000 a kid per year. So, I like what I do. I love what I do. I don't think I'll ever stop doing it. I like to start every year out with a plan on trying to invest in 3 to 5 new things. What haven't I done this year that I could do? Can I do a marina? Can I do a whatever it is? And for me, it's you know, I don't want to say it's addictive, but it can get addictive. So that's it. That's what I do. I use every tool imaginable. We've got IRAs set up for in-laws. If you have in-laws and you haven't set up IRAs for them, John and I talk. I like your slide with the Roth IRA in the middle. I have a constellation of IRAs, and I basically have a target IRA that I want to fulfill, which is usually my Roth or my about-to-be inherited Roths, and I surround it with the bank. Dick Dessage put on a seminar a number of years ago called The Private Bank, and it basically taught you how to use your family's circle of assets to fund these kinds of deals. That's what I do. You build up that constellation of IRAs, and you'll find it within a very short time, you're self-funding things and reaching out and doing more repeat deals that are much more profitable. Pull the right arrow out, target the deal with that, and then fund it with everything else. You got to pull the trigger and act.
Awesome. So let's go ahead. We got 15 minutes. Let's go ahead and jump right into just some Q&A. We'll start here. So the question, I'll repeat the question. So the question was, why did you set up a Roth IRA for your daughter and not a covered education savings account?
I think it's because we knew we were going to pay for our daughter's education. We already had that set aside, and we'd already been planning that for so many years. And it just made sense for us to just think big, long term. And for those of you who love the financial calculator, it's really fun to put that $5,500 per year and put the number of years from age 13 to 59 and a half and figure out what you think you'll be able to earn in yields. It's not millions, it's billions. I mean, it's just ridiculous, crazy numbers. So we just wanted to get her excited to think really big, and so we just thought, well, let's just go with the Roth.
Stan?
The Roth IRA principal contribution you can always take out, okay? So if I had the choice, my pecking order would be a Roth IRA for our kids, because in an emergency, we could always access that. And there may even be, I can't remember, there may even be some tuition provisions in the Roth IRA. The CISA, $2,000 a year, I thought would be a great thing for the in-laws to consider contributing to every year. It's also part of my, you know, my war chest. So if I put $2,000 a year in there, you can do that until they turn 8. The year they turn 18, I think, is the rule. I'm done. I thought that would be a nice thing if I set it up that the grandparents could contribute to. Well, they never contributed to it, which is okay. So I have two very decently funded CESAs that are in a lot of deals. We have used the CESAs for the kids' educations, but I've been conservative. I haven't cleaned them out because I'd like to pass them down to some other relatives. If our daughters don't go back to grad school, which I think both of them will, that's what I'll use it for. But if they don't, then I'll use that as kind of an estate planning gift that you can hand it off to another relative, okay? But the Roth, you can always pull that money out if you need it. And that's why I would probably do the same thing. And I did do this. I said Roths first, and then I did CESAs.
So with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up because we are over 10:15. We're going to be back here at 10:30.